It's funny how a single moment can change everything. I never thought I'd be standing in the middle of my son's wedding reception, confronted with a truth so painful it took my breath away. "She's just the help," my new daughter-in-law Jennifer had whispered to her bridesmaid, not realizing I was right behind her. "We only invited her because she's writing the checks." After decades of giving everything I had, I was just the help to her. That moment changed everything, but not in the way she expected. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I was arranging fresh-cut roses in my kitchen window when the call came. My hands were still damp with water when I reached for my phone and saw my son Tyler's face lighting up the screen, his bright smile radiating through the glass. I quickly dried my fingers on my apron and answered, "Mom!" His voice vibrated with excitement, almost cracking with emotion. "She said yes! Jen said yes!" I sank into my kitchen chair, warmth blooming in my chest. My only child, my son, engaged, to be married. In that moment, I felt a constellation of emotions all at once. Joy that he'd found someone, pride that he was building his life, and yes, a whisper of melancholy that time had moved so swiftly. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I said, my voice softening. "I'm so happy for you both." "We're thinking fall," he continued, words tumbling out faster than he could control them. "Jennifer has always wanted an autumn wedding, with the changing leaves and that golden light. She has this vision, Mom. You should hear her talk about it." I smiled, picturing his face animated with love. Since losing my husband Mark to cancer 5 years ago, Tyler had been my anchor, my constant. Even when he moved to Boston for his architecture job, he called every Sunday without fail. The thought of him finding his person, his partner, filled me with a complicated happiness. "Mom?" His voice pulled me back from my thoughts. "There's more. Jennifer has her heart set on the Hawthorne estate for the venue. It's perfect, historic, elegant, exactly what she's dreamed of her whole life. I knew the place. Everyone in our part of Massachusetts did. A sprawling colonial mansion with manicured gardens and a view that stretched all the way to the Atlantic on clear days. It was also notoriously expensive. "That's quite a venue," I managed, doing mental calculations already. The insurance money from Mark's policy had been carefully invested, meant to support my retirement. But wasn't this what savings were for? The moments that mattered? Tyler hesitated before speaking again. "We went to look at it yesterday. It's even more beautiful than the pictures, but..." He paused. "The deposit alone is $15,000. With everything else, catering, flowers, the dress Jennifer wants, we're looking at close to $70,000. We can manage maybe half." "But I'll help," I said before he could finish, the words escaping before I had fully thought them through. "This is your wedding, Tyler. Your father would have wanted it to be perfect." The relief in his voice was palpable. "Mom, are you sure?" That's a lot of money. Was I sure? The truth was I wasn't. My little ranch house needed a new roof. The car was pushing 12 years old. But what was money if not a way to bring joy to the people you loved most? "I'm sure," I said with finality. "Send me the details, and we'll figure it out." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, surrounded by the roses I'd just cut from the garden Mark and I had planted together 20 years ago. He would have understood this decision. Mark had always said that love was the best investment. Theo? Next day, I called my financial advisor and arranged to liquidate some of my investments. The numbers on the screen looked so stark, so final as they diminished. But I pushed away the doubt. This was for Tyler's happiness. What greater purpose could my savings serve? Jennifer wanted to meet for lunch the following week to discuss plans. We agreed on a small cafe in downtown Crossing near her office. I arrived early, ordered a tea, and waited, a notebook and pen ready beside me. I was nervous, I realized. Though Tyler had been dating Jennifer for nearly 2 years, our interactions had been limited to holiday dinners and the occasional Sunday brunch. She was always polite but reserved, her smiles never quite reaching her eyes when directed at me. She arrived precisely on time, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that spoke of careful taste and good income. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, not a strand out of place. She looked like success, ambition personified. "Eleanor!" She greeted me with a nod, no hug, sitting down across from me and immediately signaling for the waitress. "Thanks for meeting me." "Of course," I smiled. "I'm excited to hear about your plans. Tyler said you've already chosen the venue?" Jennifer's face transformed at the mention of her vision, eyes lighting up with a passion I'd never seen in her before. "The Hawthorne estate is absolutely perfect," she gushed, pulling out her phone to show me photos. "The ceremony will be in the Rose Garden, followed by cocktails on the terrace, and then the reception in the Grand Hall." As she spoke, her fingers flew across her phone screen, showing me image after image of elegant place settings, elaborate floral arrangements, and intricate wedding cakes. Each picture was more lavish than the last, each idea grander. "We'll need to secure the venue, photographer, caterer, and florist right away," she continued, barely pausing for breath. "The best ones book up a year in advance, and we're already running behind." I nodded, jotting down notes and trying to follow the rapid-fire information. "What about the guest list?" I asked. "Tyler mentioned around 100 people." Jennifer's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "We're at 150 now, and honestly, that's after cutting it down significantly. My parents have connections that are important to maintain." She paused, giving me a look that felt like an assessment. "You don't need to worry about the numbers, though. Just the deposit amounts and due dates." Something in her tone made me sit up straighter. "I'd like to be involved in the planning too, Jennifer. Not just the financial side." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, Eleanor. Your input is welcome. But I've been planning this wedding since I was a little girl. I know exactly what I want." The waitress arrived with our food, a small salad for Jennifer, soup, and half a sandwich for me. As we ate, she laid out a timeline of payments, each one more substantial than the last. The venue deposit, the catering minimum, the photographer's fee, the florist's advance. "And we'll need to finalize the rehearsal dinner location by next week," she added, spearing a piece of lettuce with precise movements. "Tyler mentioned you might host that as well?" I hadn't discussed this with Tyler, but I nodded anyway. "Yes, I'd be happy to." "Wonderful." She checked her watch. "I should get back to the office. I've emailed you the spreadsheet with all the vendors and due dates. If you could take care of the first round of deposits by Friday, that would be ideal." As she gathered her things to leave, I found myself asking, "Would you like to come over for dinner sometime? Maybe look through some of Tyler's baby albums? I have a few of his father's family recipes I've been meaning to teach him." Something flickered across Jennifer's face. Discomfort? Impatience? "That sounds nice," she said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. "I'll check my schedule and get back to you." She never did. Over the next 8 months, I watched my savings dwindle as I funded a wedding that felt increasingly distant from me. I wrote check after check for things I had no say in choosing. When I suggested a baker, I knew who made incredible cakes for half the price of the one Jennifer had selected. My input was politely but firmly dismissed. When I offered my late mother's pearl earrings as Jennifer's something borrowed, she thanked me but said they didn't match her aesthetic. With each passing week, I felt more like a bank account than a mother of the groom. Jennifer would call or text, but only when another payment was due. Tyler, caught up in his demanding job and the whirlwind of wedding planning, became increasingly difficult to reach. Our Sunday calls became shorter, sometimes missed altogether. "She's just busy, Mom," he'd say when I mentioned Jennifer's distance. The weddings got her stressed. She really does appreciate everything you're doing. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. As the wedding day approached, I found myself standing in a bridal boutique, watching Jennifer try on dresses that cost more than my car. She twirled in front of the mirror, the saleswoman cooing over her. I sat quietly on a velvet chair, my checkbook ready, feeling strangely invisible. "What do you think?" Jennifer asked, though her eyes remained fixed on her reflection. "You look beautiful," I said truthfully. She did. The ivory lace complemented her olive skin perfectly. "Is this the one?" She nodded, still not looking at me. "It's perfect. And only $9,000. I wrote the check, handed it over, and watched as she transformed into a bride. Just not my bride, not really. In that moment, watching her admire herself in the mirror, I had the strangest feeling that I was funding a fantasy that had no place for me. But I pushed the thought away. This was for Tyler, for his happiness. What was money compared to that? A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. Kicker. Bridal shower was held at Jennifer's mother's country club in Wellesley, a sprawling colonial building with manicured lawns and views of the golf course. I arrived with a carefully wrapped silver picture frame engraved with Tyler and Jennifer's names and wedding date. Inside, I'd placed a black and white photo of Tyler as a toddler, holding his father's hand. It was one of my favorite images, capturing a moment of pure connection between father and son. The valet took my aging Honda with barely concealed disdain, parking it far from the gleaming luxury vehicles that lined the circular drive. Inside, the ballroom had been transformed with blush and gold decorations, crystal champagne flutes, and elaborate floral centerpieces. At least 30 women milled about, dressed in designer clothes that made my department store dress feel suddenly inadequate. "Eleanor, you made it." Jennifer's mother, Diane, approached with an air kiss that never quite reached my cheek. "We weren't sure if you'd be able to drive all this way on your own." I forced a smile. "It's only an hour and a half. I wouldn't miss it." She patted my arm with a condescension that made my skin prickle. "Well, you're here now. Let me show you to your seat." My seat turned out to be at a small table near the kitchen entrance, far from the bride-to-be and her closest friends. Beside me sat Jennifer's great-aunt Martha, who was hard of hearing, and a cousin who spent the entire event texting. The message couldn't have been clearer if they'd stamped "outsider" on my forehead. When the time came for gifts, I watched as Jennifer unwrapped package after package of luxury items: crystal stemware, Egyptian cotton linens, a weekend cooking class in Napa Valley. When my modest frame was unveiled, Jennifer's smile faltered for just a moment. "Oh, how quaint," she said, holding it up briefly before quickly moving on to the next gift, a sterling silver tea service from her mother. I sat there, the taste of expensive champagne turning bitter in my mouth. I'd spent hours choosing that frame, selecting that photo, believing that sharing a piece of Tyler's history, of our family, would mean something to the woman who was joining it. The dismissal stung more than I wanted to admit. After the shower, as guests began to leave, I approached Jennifer with her mother's country club card that had fallen from her purse. "Jennifer, you dropped this," I said, extending the small plastic rectangle. She turned, her face flushed with champagne and attention. "Oh, thanks," she said, barely looking at me as she took the card. Then, turning to her friend Melissa, she added in a stage whisper, "It's not like I need it anyway." After the wedding, we'll have memberships at both clubs. "Lucky you," Melissa giggled. "Your future is set." "Well, when you marry into money, you have to make the most of it," Jennifer replied with a smirk. I froze, the words hitting me like a physical blow. Marry into money? Tyler was doing well at his architecture firm, certainly, but he was far from wealthy. The down payment for their condo had come from my savings, The lavish honeymoon to Bali I was funding. The wedding itself. Nearly every penny was coming from me. What exactly had Jennifer been told about our family's finances? On the drive home, my thoughts raced. Has Tyler misrepresented his financial situation? Or did Jennifer simply assume, because of his profession and education, that there was family money behind him? Either way, the foundation of their relationship suddenly seemed built on sand, and I was the one being asked to make it solid with my life savings. I called Tyler that evening, my heart heavy. "How was the shower, Mom?" he asked, his voice warm, but distracted. I could hear papers shuffling in the background. "It was enlightening," I said carefully. "Tyler, there's something I need to ask you. Does Jennifer think you have money? Family money, I mean?" The line went silent for a moment. "What are you talking about?" I overheard her in the shower. She told her friend she was marrying into money. "But sweetheart, almost everything, the condo down payment, the wedding, it's all coming from my savings, from what your father left us." More silence, then a deep sigh. "Mom, it's not like that. Jennifer she grew up differently than we did. Her family has certain expectations." "Expectations that you're trying to meet with my retirement fund?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "That's not fair." Tyler's voice hardened. "You offered to help with the wedding. I never asked you to liquidate your investments." "But you knew I would," I countered, hurt blooming in my chest. "You knew I wouldn't let you go into debt for this wedding. Have you been honest with Jennifer about our finances?" "Of course I have," he snapped, but there was a hesitation that told me otherwise. "Tyler, look, Mom, I need to go. Jennifer's on her way over, and we have a meeting with the florist tomorrow morning. Can we talk about this later?" We never did. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur of payments and planning meetings. I wrote checks for the videographer, the string quartet, the custom cocktail napkins embossed with the couple's monogram. Each expense felt more frivolous than the last, but the momentum had built to a point where stopping seemed impossible. The rehearsal dinner, which I hosted, at an upscale restaurant in Boston's Seaport District, cost nearly $5,000. I sat at the head table, smiling through toasts and stories, while mentally calculating how much of my future security was disappearing with each past appetizer, and poured a glass of champagne. Jennifer's father, Richard, a commercial real estate developer with a booming voice and expensive watch, clapped me on the shoulder as the desserts were being served. "So, Eleanor, Tyler tells me you used to be a librarian?" he asked, emphasizing "used to be," as if my 30-year career was a passing hobby. "Yes, at the Boston Public Library. I retired 3 years ago." He nodded, clearly unimpressed. "Good, solid profession. Not the most lucrative, but respectable." He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "Just between us, I was worried when Jennifer first started dating Tyler. Architects don't usually make the kind of money that can maintain the lifestyle she's accustomed to, you know?" But he assured me there was family money. He winked. "Smart boy, investing in property young. That vacation home in the Berkshires sounds magnificent." I nearly choked on my water. We had no vacation home. The only property I owned was my modest ranch house, now sporting a patched rather than replaced roof thanks to the wedding expenses. "Richard, I think there's been a misunderstanding," I began, but was interrupted by the clinking of glasses as Jennifer's maid of honor called for attention for yet another toast. Later that evening, I cornered Tyler outside the restaurant while he waited for the valet to bring his car. "A vacation home in the Berkshires?" I hissed, keeping my voice low. "Tyler, what have you been telling Jennifer's family?" He had the grace to look embarrassed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father it momentarily softened my anger. "It's just, her parents are so focused on status. When we first started dating, I might have exaggerated a few things to impress them." "A few things?" "Tyler, they think we're wealthy." "We're not poor, Mom," he argued weakly. No, but I'm spending my retirement on this wedding. Everything your father and I saved. Do you understand that? There's no vacation home, no family fortune. After this wedding, there's just my Social Security and whatever I can scrape together from selling the house someday. His face fell, guilt washing over his features. I didn't realize it was that much. I'll pay you back, I promise. That's not the point, I said, my voice catching. The point is, you're starting your marriage with a lie. What happens when Jennifer realizes the truth? Before he could answer, the valet pulled up with his car, and Jennifer emerged from the restaurant calling for him. We'll figure it out, Mom, he said hurriedly, squeezing my hand. Everything will be fine, I promise. But as I watched them drive away, I couldn't shake the feeling that nothing about this situation was fine. The wedding was tomorrow, and it was becoming increasingly clear that I was funding not only an event, but an illusion. One that would eventually shatter like fine crystal dropped on marble floors. That night, alone in my hotel room, I pulled out my checkbook and calculated the total. $73,412. Almost everything I had. For a wedding where I felt like an afterthought. For a daughter-in-law who barely acknowledged me. For a fantasy my son was desperately trying to maintain. I should have been excited for the next day, for seeing my only child marry the woman he loved. Instead, I lay awake, wondering where exactly I had gone wrong, and what would happen when the last check cleared and there was nothing left to give. The morning of the wedding dawned with picture-perfect weather, clear blue skies, a gentle breeze, and golden autumn sunlight filtering through the trees surrounding the Hawthorne estate. Nature had delivered exactly what Jennifer had wished for, as if even the elements were eager to please her. I arrived early, my simple navy dress, purchased on sale at Nordstrom Rack, and freshly styled hair, my attempt at fitting into the opulent surroundings. The estate was already buzzing with activity. Florists arranged elaborate displays of copper-hued dahlias and cream roses. Lighting technicians adjusted crystal chandeliers that had been hung from the pergola where the ceremony would take place. Catering staff unloaded crates of champagne and prepared serving stations. A harried wedding coordinator with a clipboard approached me as I stood taking it all in. "Excuse me, are you with the bride or groom?" she asked, her eyes already moving. Passed me to check something off her list. "I'm the mother of the groom," I replied with a small smile. She paused, looking me up and down. "Oh, Mrs. Bennett, of course." Her tone shifted slightly, becoming more deferential. "Jennifer mentioned you'd be arriving early. Would you like to see your son? He's in the groom's suite in the East Wing." I nodded, grateful for the direction. In the sprawling mansion. As I made my way through the grand hallways, I couldn't help but notice how every surface gleamed, every detail was perfect. All of it paid for with the money that should have been supporting my retirement years. The thought brought a wave of complicated emotions. This wasn't how I'd imagined Tyler's wedding day. In my dreams, it had been a celebration where I felt included, where the mother of the groom was an honored guest, not a walking checkbook, where my son's marriage began with honesty, not illusions about wealth that didn't exist. I found Tyler in a wood-paneled library that had been converted into a preparation space for the groom and his groomsmen. He stood by a window, adjusting his bow tie, his expression distant and tense. "Tyler?" I called softly, closing the door behind me. He turned, his face lighting up briefly before settling into something more complicated. "Mom, you're here early. I wanted to see you before everything gets too hectic." I approached, straightening, his already straight tie, an excuse to be close to my son on his wedding day. "How are you feeling?" He exhaled heavily. "Nervous? Excited? Terrified?" A small, strangled laugh escaped him. "Did you know Jennifer hired doves? They're going to release them after we say our vows." I hadn't known about the doves. Another expense I'd likely find on my credit card statement next month. "Tyler," I began carefully. About what we discussed last night? Mom, please, he interrupted, stepping away from my hands. Not today. I can't deal with this today. I'm not trying to ruin anything, I assured him. But I'm worried about you starting your marriage with all these misconceptions. I chose my words delicately. Jennifer and her family believe things about our financial situation that aren't true. His jaw tightened. I'm going to fix it. After the honeymoon, I'll sit down with her and explain everything. And if she's angry, if she feels deceived, she won't be, Tyler insisted, but his eyes betrayed his uncertainty. She loves me, not my supposed family money. I wanted to believe him. I desperately wanted to believe that the woman my son was, marrying in less than 2 hours, truly loved him for who he was, not the lifestyle he pretended to provide. Just promise me you'll be honest with her soon, I said finally. Secrets have a way of coming out at the worst possible times. He nodded, pulling me into a quick hug. I promise. Now go get settled. The ceremony will start before we know it. As I left the groom's suite, I noticed Jennifer's parents huddled with the wedding planner near the grand staircase, gesturing emphatically. Their voices carried as I approached. Absolutely unacceptable, Richard was saying, his face flushed with anger. We specifically requested Veuve Clicquot for the toast, not this domestic sparkling wine. The wedding planner looked close to tears. Sir, I explained this to Jennifer 3 weeks ago. The Veuve would have added another $8,000 to the budget, and Mrs. Bennet had already reached her maximum. Mrs. Bennet? Diane interrupted, her sculpted eyebrows rising toward her hairline. What does Eleanor have to do with the champagne? Selection. The coordinator blinked in confusion. She's the one paying for everything? All the vendor contracts are in her name. Richard's face darkened. That's impossible. Tyler assured us his trust fund was covering the majority of expenses. I don't know anything about a trust fund, the coordinator replied, checking her clipboard. But I have copies of all the checks and credit card authorizations. They're all from Eleanor Bennet. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. This was exactly the scenario I'd been dreading. The truth about our finances emerging at the worst possible moment, on the wedding day itself. The coordinator spotted me hovering nearby, and her eyes widened in recognition. Oh, Mrs. Bennet. Perhaps you can clear this up. Richard and Diane turned sharply, their expressions shifting from confusion to something harder when they saw me. Eleanor, Richard boomed, his businessman's voice echoing in the marble hallway. There seems to be some confusion about the financial arrangements for this wedding. I swallowed hard, feeling cornered. What seems to be the problem? Apparently, Diane said with barely concealed disdain, you've been paying for this entire event, which is surprising, given what Tyler told us about his financial situation. I wanted to contribute, I said carefully. Tyler is my only child after all. Contribute, yes, Richard pressed. But fund the entire thing? Tyler told us explicitly that he was using his inheritance and trust fund. His eyes narrowed. Does he even have those things? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with implications. Before I could formulate a response that wouldn't completely expose my son's deception, a commotion from the bridal suite saved me. Jennifer's voice, shrill with panic. What do you mean they won't deliver the flowers without final payment? The coordinator excused herself and rushed toward the crisis, leaving me alone with Jennifer's suspicious parents. I should see if I can help, I murmured, attempting to slip past them. Diane caught my arm, her manicured fingers digging into my skin. This conversation isn't over, Eleanor. If Tyler has been misleading our daughter about his financial situation, your daughter is marrying my son, not his bank account, I replied, finding my voice at last. At least, I hope that's the case. I pulled away from her grip and hurried toward the sound of Jennifer's distress, my mind racing. The wedding was unraveling before it had even begun. The foundation of lies my son had built was crumbling, threatening to take his relationship down with it. I found Jennifer in the bridal suite, resplendent in her gown, but with tears threatening to ruin her perfect makeup. The florist stood awkwardly by the door, a tablet in hand showing an outstanding balance. "The contract says final payment on delivery," he was explaining apologetically. "We need the remaining $12,000 before we can set up the ceremony arrangements." Jennifer looked absolutely stricken. "But my father already took care of this." "He said everything was paid in full." The florist shook his head. "I'm sorry, but we only received the deposit. The final payment never came through." Jennifer turned to her bridesmaids in desperation. "One of you calls my father. Now." As one of the women rushed to make the call, Jennifer caught sight of me, standing in the doorway. Her expression shifted instantly from panic to calculation. "Eleanor," she said, her voice suddenly honeyed. "Thank goodness you're here. There's been a terrible mix-up with the flowers." I nodded slowly, understanding exactly what she wanted from me. Another check. Another several $1,000s to save the day. "So I heard," I replied neutrally. She moved closer, lowering her voice. "I know you've already done so much for this wedding, but we have a bit of an emergency. The florist needs the final payment before they'll set up, and Daddy's phone is going straight to voicemail." The naked desperation in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. In this moment of crisis, I wasn't Tyler's mother or even a welcomed guest. I was a solution to a financial problem, a walking ATM to be tapped when needed. "Of course," I heard myself say, reaching for my purse. "I'll take care of it." Relief washed over her face. "I knew you would. You're a lifesaver, Eleanor, truly." As I filled out yet another check, bringing my total wedding expenditure to over $85,000, Jennifer turned to her maid of honor and whispered something that wasn't meant for my ears. But in the acoustics of the high-ceilinged room, her words carried to me with perfect clarity. Good thing we invited her after all. She's been useful. The pen froze in my hand, ink bleeding into the paper. Useful. Not loved, not respected, not even liked. Useful. In that moment, something shifted inside me. A quiet rearrangement of priorities. A sudden clarity. I'd spent months emptying my accounts for a wedding where I was barely acknowledged, for a daughter-in-law who saw me as nothing more than a convenient source of funds. I finished writing the check, my hand steadier than my heart, and handed it to the florist. He thanked me profusely before hurrying off to begin setting up. Jennifer turned to me with a practiced smile. "Eleanor, would you mind checking on the cake delivery? They should have been here by now." Not, "Would you like to see my dress up close?" Or, "How are you feeling on this special day?" Just another task, another thing I could be useful for. I nodded without speaking and left the room. My mind made up. I would see this wedding through. I owed my son that much. But when it was over, things would change. They had to change. I just didn't know yet how dramatically they would do. The wedding ceremony was picture perfect, exactly as Jennifer had planned. Guests seated on white chiavery chairs watched as she glided down the rose-petal-strewn aisle on her father's arm, her veil fluttering in the gentle autumn breeze. The string quartet played Pachelbel's canon, their notes rising into the clear blue sky. Tyler stood beneath an archway dripping with flowers, his expression a mixture of awe and apprehension as he watched his bride approach. I sat in the front row, the designated spot for the mother of the groom, feeling strangely detached from the proceedings. The gold-embossed program in my hands listed me simply as Mrs. Eleanor Bennett, while Jennifer's parents received a full paragraph detailing Richard's business accomplishments and Diane's charitable foundation work. Another small slight that ordinarily would have stung, but now barely registered against the weight of what I'd overheard in the bridal suite. The officiant, a distinguished-looking judge who was apparently a golfing buddy of Richard's, spoke eloquently about partnership, honesty, and shared dreams. Each word struck me as ironically appropriate, considering the tangle of lies that had brought us to this moment. When the time came for the ring exchange, I watched Tyler slide the 3-carat diamond onto Jennifer's finger, a ring I knew had been charged to my credit card, despite Tyler's assurances that he'd saved for it himself. Jennifer's vows were polished and camera-ready, promising to honor Tyler's ambition and support his vision. Tyler's were heartfelt but vague, his voice cracking slightly as he promised to always be the man you deserve. As the newlyweds sealed their vows with a kiss, the promised doves were released into the sky, their wings catching the sunlight as they circled above the estate before disappearing into the distance. The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Jennifer and Tyler beamed as they processed back down the aisle, now husband and wife. I clapped mechanically, trying to muster genuine joy for my son's sake. He deserved happiness, even if his path to it was built on financial quicksand. But as the guests moved toward the cocktail reception on the terrace, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was watching a beautiful, expensive illusion, one that would dissolve the moment reality intruded. The cocktail hour showcased the best of New England autumn: maple-glazed bacon-wrapped scallops, miniature lobster rolls, and pumpkin bisque shooters circulated on silver trays. Premium open bars at each corner of the terrace served signature cocktails named after the bride and groom. A jazz trio played softly in the background, providing the perfect acoustic backdrop for networking and gossip. I stood alone near the stone balustrade, nursing a glass of white wine and watching the social dynamics unfold. Jennifer floated through the crowd like royalty, accepting congratulations and compliments on her dress, the venue, the food, all elements I had funded but she was receiving credit for. Tyler followed in her wake, shaking hands with her fathers, business associates, and accepting backslash from fraternity brothers. Quite the affair, isn't it? I turned to find a woman about my age standing beside me, her silver hair elegantly styled, her simple but expensive dress suggesting tasteful wealth. She gestured toward her glass in a toast. "I'm Catherine Morgan, Jennifer's godmother," she introduced herself. "You must be Tyler's mother." I nodded, grateful for the company. "Eleanor Bennett." "Yes." "Lovely ceremony," she continued, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Richard and Diane are over the moon. They've been planning Jennifer's society wedding since she was in diapers." "Society wedding?" I echoed. Catherine's perfectly arched eyebrow rose slightly. "Oh yes. The Morgan Prestons have been fixtures in Boston society for generations. Diane was determined that Jennifer would make the perfect match: good family, solid finances." She sipped her champagne. "Your son must be quite successful in his field." Before I could formulate a response that wouldn't expose Tyler's facade, Jennifer's voice cut through the ambient chatter, unnaturally loud as she spoke to a cluster of friends near the bar. "Tyler's family estate in the Berkshires is divine. We're thinking of hosting Christmas there this year, aren't we, darling?" Tyler's smile froze for a millisecond before he recovered. "If Mother doesn't mind, of course." All eyes turned to me, including Catherine's, now bright with interest. "I wasn't aware you had property in the Berkshires," Catherine remarked. "Wonderful area." "Which part?" The lie sat bitter on my tongue. I could perpetuate it, continue the charade my son had created. Or I could tell the truth, right here among Jennifer's social circle, and watch the entire house of cards collapse. For Tyler's sake, I chose a middle path. "We don't, actually," I said with a small smile. "Just a modest home outside of Boston. I think Tyler and Jennifer might be looking at vacation properties." Jennifer's expression flickered with something: annoyance? Panic? Before she quickly steered her friends toward another conversation. Catherine gave me a curious look, but thankfully didn't pursue the subject. As the cocktail hour wound down, the wedding coordinator began ushering guests toward the grand hall for the reception. I found my seat at a table near the back of the room, despite the traditional placement of parents at the head table. My table mates were distant relatives of Jennifer's, an elderly great-uncle who was hard of hearing, and two cousins who spent most of their time taking selfies for social media. The grand entrance of the wedding party was a choreographed affair, with bridesmaids and groomsmen dancing into the hall to upbeat music, culminating in Tyler and Jennifer's arrival to thunderous applause. They shared their first dance beneath a canopy of twinkling lights, Jennifer's dress shimmering as Tyler guided her across the floor. Dinner was served, filet mignon and butter-poached lobster, paired with wines selected by a sommelier I had paid to consult. Each plate probably cost more than what I now had left in my checking account. I ate little, my appetite diminished by the knowledge that this extravagance was costing me my financial security. When the time came for toasts, Richard stood first, glass in hand. His voice boomed through the professional sound system as he welcomed guests and spoke about his daughter. "Jennifer has always been exceptional," he declared. "From her academic achievements at Wellesley to her success in marketing, she has never settled for less than the best." He turned to Tyler with an appraising look. "So when she brought home this young architect, I'll admit I had my doubts. But Tyler quickly proved himself worthy of our Jennifer, demonstrating the kind of financial acumen and family background we had hoped for in her partner." My fingers tightened around my water glass as Richard continued. "Today marks not just the union of two people, but of two families of similar standing and values. The Prestons and the Bennetts, a perfect match." Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. I watched Tyler's face, saw the slight tension in his jaw as he maintained his smile. He knew every word was built on falsehood. There was no family fortune, no vacation home, no trust fund. Just my depleted retirement account and a stack of credit card receipts. As dinner concluded and the dance floor opened, I found myself approached by the wedding coordinator, her expression apologetic. "Mrs. Bennett, I hate to bother you, but there's a small issue with the DJ's final payment. The check you provided earlier was declined." My heart sank. I had reached my limit, literally and figuratively. "I'll take care of it," I said automatically, though I wasn't sure how. My credit cards were maxed out, my accounts nearly empty, as I fumbled through my purse, looking for a card that might still have some available credit. Jennifer appeared at my elbow, her expression tight. "Is there a problem?" she asked the coordinator, not looking at me. "Just a small payment issue," the coordinator assured her. "Nothing to worry about." Jennifer's perfectly made-up face darkened. "On my wedding day? Seriously?" She turned to me then, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "What's going on? I thought all the vendors were paid." "There was a final payment due for the DJ," I explained quietly. "I'm handling it." "Well, handle it quickly," she hissed. "I won't have my reception ruined because you couldn't manage the finances properly." Her words struck me like physical blows. You couldn't manage the finances properly, as if I were an employee who had failed at a task, not a mother who had given everything. "Actually, Jennifer," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "I've reached my financial limit. There's nothing left." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "What do you mean, nothing left? How is that possible?" "It's possible because I've spent over $85,000 on this wedding," I said simply. That was everything I had. For a moment, genuine shock registered on her face. Then it was replaced by calculation. "Well, can't you, I don't know, tap into your retirement fund or something? Just until after the honeymoon?" The casual way she suggested I further compromise my future, as if my financial security were an inconvenience to her perfect day, crystallized everything I had been feeling. "There is no more retirement fund, Jennifer," I said quietly. "This wedding was my retirement fund." Before she could respond, Tyler approached, his expression concerned as he sensed the tension between us. "Everything okay?" he asked, looking from his new wife to me. "Your mother is saying she can't pay the DJ," Jennifer said, her voice rising slightly. "Apparently she's run out of money." Tyler's face paled. Mom, is that true? I nodded once, unwilling to create a scene at his wedding but equally unwilling to continue the pretense. We'll figure it out, Tyler said quickly, pulling out his wallet. I have a credit card we can use. The one I co-signed for you? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Jennifer looked between us, confusion and suspicion dawning in her eyes. What's going on? Tyler, what is she talking about? But before he could answer, the DJ's voice boomed through the speakers, announcing it was time for the mother-son dance. Tyler gave me a pleading look, a silent request to maintain appearances, to postpone this reckoning for just a little longer. For his sake, I agreed, taking his outstretched hand and allowing him to lead me to the dance floor. As we moved to the gentle melody of What a Wonderful World, a song his father and I had danced to at our own wedding, I could feel the eyes of the guests upon us, all smiles and misty-eyed sentiment. If only they knew the truth behind the perfect facade. The song ended, and applause rippled through the reception hall as Tyler led me back to my table. His hand squeezed mine briefly, a silent thank you for maintaining the illusion of happy family unity, for not causing a scene on his wedding day. I managed a weak smile in return, though inside, I felt hollow. We'll talk tomorrow, Mom, he whispered, before returning to the head table where Jennifer waited, her expression a carefully composed mask of bridal bliss. I watched him go, wondering what tomorrow's conversation would entail. More excuses? More promises to pay me back someday? Or perhaps finally, honesty with his new wife about their actual financial situation. I had just settled back into my seat when Richard Preston materialized beside me, 2 flutes of champagne in hand. He placed one in front of me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Eleanor, he said, taking the empty chair next to mine. I think it's time we had a proper chat, don't you? The DJ had started playing upbeat dance music, and most of the guests had moved to the dance floor. Our table was temporarily deserted except for Jennifer's great-uncle, who appeared to have dozed off in his chair. What would you like to discuss, Richard? I asked, leaving the champagne untouched. He leaned in slightly, his expensive cologne almost overwhelming. I've been making some inquiries. Discreet ones, of course. His tone was conversational, but I could sense the steel beneath. It seems there's no Bennett family estate in the Berkshires. No trust fund. No investment portfolio. He paused, eyes narrowing. In fact, from what I can gather, there's just a modest house in Medford and a librarian's pension. My stomach tightened, but I held his gaze. That's correct. So Tyler has been embellishing his financial situation. I believe that's between Tyler and Jennifer, I replied carefully. Richard's laugh was short and humorless. I don't think you understand the situation, Eleanor. My daughter was pursued by executives, doctors, even a state senator's son. She chose your boy because he presented himself as financially stable, as having a background compatible with hers. His voice hardened. If he misrepresented himself to secure this marriage, that's fraud. The accusation hung in the air between us. I stared at Richard, this man who placed monetary value above all else, who had raised a daughter to do the same, and found my fear giving way to indignation. Fraud? I repeated. Is that how you view marriage? As a financial contract? Don't be naive, he scoffed. Of course it is. Love is wonderful, but it doesn't pay for the lifestyle Jennifer deserves. And what lifestyle is that exactly? I asked, a newfound boldness rising within me. The one you've apparently been unable to provide without attaching her to someone. Else's bank account? His face flushed with anger. Watch yourself, Eleanor. You're hardly in a position to lecture anyone about financial responsibility. From what I understand, you've nearly bankrupted yourself paying for this wedding. The truth of his words stung, but I refused to show it. I chose to help my son. That was my decision. A foolish one, Richard remarked coldly. And now what? You expect Tyler and Jennifer to support you when your money runs out? Is that the plan? Before I could respond, the wedding coordinator appeared again, her expression apologetic but urgent. Mrs. Bennett? I'm so sorry to interrupt, but the venue manager needs to speak with you. It's about the final balance. Richard's eyebrows rose as he stood. I'll leave you to your financial matters. He walked away without another word, likely to share what he'd learned with his wife and their social circle. I followed the coordinator to a small office off the main reception area, where the venue manager waited, a stack of paperwork before him. Mrs. Bennett, he began without preamble, there seems to be some confusion about the remaining balance for today's event. According to our records, there's still $12,450 outstanding, due at the conclusion of the reception. I stared at him in confusion. That can't be right. I made the final venue payment 3 weeks ago. I reached for my phone to check my bank records. The manager slid a document across the desk. This was the deposit schedule we agreed upon. The final payment was indeed due today. I scanned the paper, recognizing my signature at the bottom. In the chaos of wedding expenses, I had somehow misremembered this significant final payment. Or, perhaps subconsciously, I'd known I wouldn't have the funds when the time came. I see, I said quietly, reality crashing down around me. The problem is, I don't have the funds to cover this. The manager's professional demeanor cooled noticeably. I understand this is awkward, Mrs. Bennett, but we can't conclude the event without payment. Perhaps one of the newlyweds has a credit card we could use? The humiliation burned through me. After everything I'd sacrificed, I was about to become the mother who couldn't pay for her son's wedding reception, who would be forced to interrupt the celebration to beg for financial help from the bridal couple. Let me speak with my son. I managed, rising on unsteady legs. I made my way back to the reception hall, searching for Tyler among the dancing guests. I spotted him near the cake table, deep in conversation with Jennifer's maid of honor, while Jennifer posed for photos with college friends. As I approached, I caught fragments of their conversation. Sure she won't cause problems? The maid of honor was asking. Tyler shook his head. Mom's always been reasonable. Once we're back from the honeymoon, I'll sit her down and explain that things are going to be different. No more monthly dinners, no expectations of grandkid time whenever she wants. Jennifer needs boundaries with her. Good. The woman nodded. Jen says she's been suffocating, always calling, always wanting to help with wedding stuff when she doesn't understand Jennifer's vision. Tyler sighed. She means well, but yeah, it's been a lot. Thank God she had the money for this wedding, though. I don't know what we would have done otherwise. The maid of honor laughed. Used her for her checkbook and now putting her in her place? Cold, Bennett. Very cold. Hey, that's not fair, Tyler protested, but his laugh betrayed him. She offered to pay. We just took her up on it. I froze, my son's words cutting deeper than any knife could reach. After everything, the sleepless nights worrying about money, the liquidated investments, the maxed-out credit cards, this was how he spoke about me when he thought I couldn't hear. As a checkbook with inconvenient emotional attachments? Before I could process this fresh wound, Jennifer appeared at Tyler's side, slightly breathless from dancing. There you are, she exclaimed, looping her arm through his. Come on, they're about to bring out the cake. She spotted me then, her smile faltering slightly. Eleanor, is everything okay? You look upset. The concern in her voice was as artificial as the flowers in her bouquet, present for appearance's sake but devoid of genuine feeling. At that moment, something inside me snapped. Not with rage or even hurt, but with clarity. No, I said simply. Everything is not okay. Tyler's expression turned wary. Mom, what's wrong? The venue needs the final payment of $12,000, I stated flatly. I don't have it. Jennifer's perfectly made-up face contorted with alarm. What do you mean you don't have it? You're handling all the payments. I corrected her. Until I ran out of money, which I now have. Tyler stepped forward, lowering his voice. Mom, please, we can figure this out later. Just put it on your credit card for now. My credit cards are maxed out, I replied, my voice steady despite the trembling I felt inside. I've spent everything I had on this wedding, over $85,000. There's nothing left. Jennifer glanced around nervously, aware that nearby guests were beginning to notice our intense conversation. This is ridiculous, she hissed. You can't do this right now. It's our wedding day. I'm well aware of what day it is, I said. I'm also aware that I'm standing in a room full of people who believe my son comes from money, who think there's a family estate in the Berkshires, who've been told stories about trust funds and investments that don't exist. Tyler's face paled. Mom, don't. Please. Don't what, Tyler? Don't tell the truth? I looked between him and Jennifer, seeing them clearly perhaps for the first time. I've given everything I had to create this illusion for you. I've emptied my accounts, maxed out my credit cards, compromised my future, all so you could pretend to be something you're not. Jennifer's eyes widened with growing horror as she realized where this conversation was heading. Eleanor, this isn't the time. Or place, when would be a better time, Jennifer? After the honeymoon? After you've enjoyed the benefits of my financial sacrifice a little longer? The words flowed now, unstoppable. I heard you earlier, in the bridal suite. You said I was useful. That's all I've been to you, isn't it? A useful checkbook. The music continued to play, but a bubble of silence had formed around our small group as nearby guests sensed the tension and edged closer, curiosity overriding politeness. Mom, Tyler pleaded, you're making a scene. Am I? Or am I finally standing up for myself after months of being treated like an ATM machine with no feelings? I turned to Jennifer, whose face had transitioned from horror to cold anger. You've never wanted me as a mother-in-law. You've tolerated me because I was paying for your dream wedding. That's not true, she protested weakly, but her eyes told a different story. It is true, I countered, and now that the money's gone, I'm suddenly an inconvenience, a problem to be managed. I heard Tyler just now talking about putting me in my place, establishing boundaries once you return from your honeymoon. The honeymoon I paid for, by the way. More guests were watching now, whispering behind their hands. Jennifer's mother had materialized at the edge of our group, her expression a mixture of confusion and alarm. Eleanor, what's going on? Diane demanded, inserting herself into our circle. I turned to her, past caring about social niceties or saving face. I was just explaining to Jennifer and Tyler that I've run out of money to pay for this extravagant wedding. A wedding your daughter demanded while treating me like hired help rather than family. Richard appeared at his wife's side, his face darkening. I think we should continue this conversation somewhere private. Why? I asked, my voice rising slightly. Isn't this what society weddings are all about? Appearances? Making sure everyone sees how wealthy and successful you are? I gestured around at the opulent decorations. Well, now everyone can see the truth. There is no Bennett family fortune. There is no vacation home. There's just me, a retired librarian who emptied her life savings to help her son impress his fiancé's family. The shocked gasps and murmurs around us confirmed that my words were having their intended effect. The carefully constructed facade was crumbling, and I found I didn't care anymore. The reception hall had fallen eerily silent except for the music still playing in the background, an upbeat dance number that now felt jarringly inappropriate. Every eye was on our small group, standing near the cake table. Jennifer's face had turned an alarming shade of red, while Tyler looked as if he might be physically ill. Eleanor, Richard hissed, gripping my elbow. This is neither the time nor the place. I pulled my arm from his grasp. I disagree. This is exactly the time and place. After all, isn't a wedding supposed to be about honesty? About two families coming together in truth? He glared at me, then turned to the gathering crowd with a forced laugh. Perhaps we could all give the family a moment of privacy. But the guests, scenting drama, held their ground. Several had pulled out phones, though. They were trying to be subtle about it. Jennifer's godmother, Catherine, stood nearby, watching with undisguised interest. Jennifer seemed to realize the damage control needed and stepped forward, her voice honey-sweet but trembling slightly. Eleanor is just a bit overwhelmed with emotion. Mother-son dances can be so touching. That's not what this is about, and you know it, I replied, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. This is about respect, about recognition, about not being treated like a servant at my own son's wedding. The word servant landed with precision, causing several guests to exchange glances. Jennifer's smile froze on her face. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, attempting to maintain her composure. Don't you? I countered. Just an hour ago, I heard you refer to me as the help. Earlier today, you called me useful for writing checks. At every turn during this wedding planning, you've dismissed my input, ignored my calls, and treated me with barely concealed disdain. The only time you've shown me anything resembling warmth was when you needed another payment. A murmur rippled through the assembled guests. Diane stepped forward, clearly trying to salvage the situation. I'm sure Jennifer didn't mean anything by it, she said, her voice brittle with forced pleasantness. Wedding stress affects us all differently. That's right, Jennifer added quickly. I've been under tremendous pressure trying to create the perfect day. If I said anything that seemed dismissive, I certainly didn't mean it. I looked at her directly, seeing the calculation behind her eyes. Even now, facing exposure, she was performing, playing the role of the gracious, slightly harried bride. You meant every word, I said quietly. And that would be your right if you were paying for this wedding yourself. But you're not. I turned to address the wider audience. For those who don't know, I've funded this entire event. Every flower, every canapé, every crystal glass you're drinking from, all paid for by me, a retired librarian who emptied her life savings and retirement accounts to give her son and daughter-in-law their dream wedding. The shocked whispers intensified. Richard's face had darkened to a dangerous shade of purple, while Diane looked as if she might faint. Mom, please stop, Tyler begged, finally finding his voice. I turned to him, my heart breaking all over again at the sight of his distress. Why should I stop, Tyler? Because it's embarrassing. Because it ruins the story you've been telling everyone about your family's wealth? The story that apparently was convincing enough for Jennifer to accept your proposal? Jennifer's shoulders stiffened. That's completely unfair. I didn't marry Tyler for money. Didn't you? I asked, genuinely curious. Then why did Richard just inform me that you chose Tyler over executives and doctors because he presented himself as financially stable? Why did I overhear you telling your friend you were marrying into money? Color drained from Jennifer's face. You were eavesdropping on my private conversations? I wasn't eavesdropping. You were speaking loudly enough for anyone nearby to hear, I replied. Just like you were when you called me the help earlier today. The venue manager chose that moment to approach our group, clearing his throat uncomfortably. Excuse me, but I really do need to discuss the outstanding balance. Of course you do, I said, turning to him. And I'm afraid I don't have it. Perhaps you should ask the bride and groom, or her parents, who I believe were under the impression that they were marrying into a wealthy family. Richard stepped forward, his businessman's instincts finally kicking in. How much is required to settle the account? $12,450, the manager replied promptly. Richard blinked, clearly taken aback by the amount, but reached for his wallet. I'll take care of it. We can sort out the misunderstandings later. As he pulled out a credit card, I felt a strange sense of vindication. At least now they were paying for something, rather than letting me shoulder the entire financial burden. Jennifer seemed to realize the situation was spiraling beyond repair and made one last attempt to salvage her image. She approached me, placing a hand on my arm in a gesture of false reconciliation. "Eleanor," she said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "I'm so sorry you've been feeling unappreciated. Of course we're grateful for your contribution. Why? Don't we go somewhere private and talk this through? It's all just a misunderstanding." I looked down at her perfectly manicured hand on my sleeve, then back to her face. Beautiful, calculating, and utterly insincere. "There's no misunderstanding," I said clearly. "You called me the help because that's how you see me, not as Tyler's mother, not as family, but as a convenience, a wallet with legs." She dropped her hand, her facade cracking slightly. "That's not what I meant." "It's exactly what you meant," I countered. "And it might have been forgettable if it was just words. But actions speak louder, don't they? When you dismissed every suggestion I made for this wedding, when you scheduled planning meetings at times you knew I couldn't attend, when you seated me at the furthest table from the bride and groom, those actions told me exactly what my place was in your eyes." Tyler tried once more to intervene, his voice pleading. "Mom, this isn't like you. You've never been confrontational like this." "You're right," I agreed, turning to him. "I've always been the peacemaker, the one who smooths things over, the one who gives and gives without asking for anything in return." I paused, feeling a lifetime of accommodating others finally reaching its limit. "But I've learned something important today, Tyler. I've learned that if you don't stand up for yourself, no one else will." He had no response to that, his eyes dropping in what I hoped was shame. The venue manager, having secured payment from Richard, discreetly withdrew from our group. The DJ, sensing the tension, had lowered the music volume, leaving our conversation uncomfortably exposed. Catherine, Jennifer's godmother, stepped forward unexpectedly. "I think what Eleanor has shared deserves acknowledgement. If she's truly funded this entire celebration," she gestured around at the opulent surroundings, "then she deserves our respect, not dismissal." Several guests nodded in agreement, their expressions a mixture of discomfort and sympathy. Jennifer's carefully constructed image as the perfect bride was unraveling thread by thread. Diane, desperate to regain control of the situation, clapped her hands loudly. "Well, I think it's time for cake, don't you? Let's get the photographer over here and continue with the celebration." But the mood had shifted irrevocably. The guests moved toward the cake table with reluctance, their excited chatter replaced by awkward murmurs. The magical atmosphere of the wedding had been punctured, reality intruding on the fantasy Jennifer had so carefully orchestrated. As the crowd shuffled away, Jennifer turned to me, dropping all pretense. Her voice was low and venomous. "How dare you ruin my wedding day?" she hissed. "After everything we've done for you." The absurdity of her statement nearly made me laugh. "What exactly have you done for me, Jennifer? Please enlighten me." "We included you," she spat. "We let you be part of this day when, frankly, it would have been easier not to have you here at all." And there it was, the unvarnished truth finally spoken aloud. "Thank you for your honesty," I said calmly. "It's refreshing after months of pretense." Richard returned, tucking his wallet back into his jacket. "The venue bill is settled," he announced grimly. "Now, Eleanor, I think it would be best if you left before you cause any more disruption." I glanced around the reception hall, at the elaborate floral arrangements I had paid for, the premium open bar I had funded, the towering cake I had selected and purchased. Every element of this lavish celebration represented a piece of my financial security sacrificed for a son and daughter-in-law who saw me as an inconvenience. "You're right," I agreed, surprising him. "I should leave." Tyler's expression shifted from anger to alarm. "Mom, wait." "No, Tyler. Your father-in-law is right. I've said what needed to be said. I've finally stood up for myself after months of being treated like an ATM machine rather than your mother." I straightened my shoulders, feeling lighter than I had in months. "I hope you and Jennifer will be very happy together. I truly do." But know this, I won't be writing any more checks. I won't be solving any more financial emergencies. From now on, you're on your own. I turned to Jennifer, who was watching me with barely contained fury. Congratulations on your wedding, Jennifer. I hope it was everything you dreamed of. I paused, allowing myself one final moment of complete honesty. Because it cost me everything I had. With that, I turned and walked toward the exit, head held high despite the whispers that followed me. I had intended to retrieve my overnight bag from the bridal suite, but decided to leave it behind. There was nothing in it I couldn't replace, and I couldn't bear to return to that room where I had been so clearly shown my place in the hierarchy. As I pushed open the heavy doors to step outside, I heard Tyler calling after me. For a moment, I considered stopping, turning back, giving him one more chance to make this right. But then I remembered his words to the maid of honor, about putting me in my place, about establishing boundaries once they returned from their honeymoon. So I kept walking, each step taking me further from the illusion and closer to whatever new reality awaited me on the other side of this day. The evening air felt clean and cool against my skin as I descended the grand stone steps of the Hawthorne estate. Twinkling lights illuminated the manicured gardens, creating a fairy tale atmosphere that now seemed hollow and artificial. Without my purse or jacket, both left behind in my hurried exit, I felt strangely unburdened, as if I'd shed more than just physical possessions. A young valet approached, his expression curious. "Would you like me to bring your car around, ma'am?" I shook my head, offering a small smile. "No, thank you. I think I'll walk for a bit." He glanced uncertainty at my formal attire and heels, clearly wondering how far I intended to go, but merely nodded respectfully. "As you wish. Have a good evening." The estate's long, winding driveway stretched before me, lined with old oak trees and elegant lampposts. In the distance, I could see the main road, and beyond it, the lights of a small town. It wasn't an impossible distance to walk, even in heels. I had taken perhaps 20 steps when I heard the sound of hurried footsteps behind me. I didn't turn, assuming it was Tyler making one last attempt to smooth things over without actually addressing the real issues. "Mrs. Bennet! Eleanor, wait!" The voice wasn't Tyler's but Catherine's, Jennifer's godmother. I paused, turning to find her hurrying down the steps, a small handbag and what appeared to be my purse clutched in her hands. "You forgot this," she said, slightly breathless as she caught up to me. "And I thought you might need a ride." She gestured toward a sleek silver Mercedes parked nearby. I hesitated, surprised by her unexpected kindness. "That's very thoughtful, but I wouldn't want to take you away from the reception." Catherine waved dismissively. "Please. After that magnificent display of backbone, watching people eat cake would be terribly anticlimactic." Her eyes, sharp and assessing, held none of the judgment I expected. "Besides, I think we have things to discuss." Curiosity overrode my desire for solitude, and I nodded, accepting my purse from her outstretched hand. "Thank you." The interior of her car was immaculate, smelling of expensive leather and subtle perfume. Catherine drove with confidence, navigating the country roads with practiced ease. "Where are you staying?" she asked. "The Maple Inn, just outside of town," I replied, suddenly remembering I had a room booked for the night. "Though I'm not sure I'll be welcome there now. It was part of the wedding block." Catherine snorted. "Nonsense. Richard may be furious, but he's far too image-conscious to cancel your reservation and risk further gossip." She glanced at me appraisingly. "You certainly gave people something to talk about." "That wasn't my intention," I admitted, gazing out at the darkening landscape. "I just couldn't pretend anymore." "Good for you," Catherine said firmly. "I've known Jennifer since she was born. Spoiled doesn't begin to cover it. Diane and Richard raised her to believe her worth was tied to her social status and acquisition of luxury. She sighed. I love her, but I've never approved of how they shaped her values. I remained silent, unwilling to criticize Tyler's new wife further, despite everything. Catherine seemed to understand my reticence. Your son, she continued, carefully. He seems like a good young man at heart. Misguided, perhaps, but not malicious. He wasn't raised to be this way, I said softly, feeling the need to defend the child I had raised, if not the man he had become. His father was humble, hard-working. We never had much, but we value honesty above all else. People change when they want something badly enough, Catherine observed. And your son wanted Jennifer, or perhaps the world she represents. The truth of her words stung. Has Tyler really changed so fundamentally? Or had he always harbored these materialistic aspirations and I'd been too blind to see them? We rode in contemplative silence for several minutes before Catherine spoke again. What will you do now? It was a question I hadn't allowed myself to consider yet. The future stretched before me, suddenly uncharted and uncertain. Honestly? Don't know, I admitted. Financially, I'm compromised, to put it mildly. My savings are gone, my credit cards are maxed out. I'll have to sell my house, and probably find part-time work to supplement my pension. And your relationship with Tyler? I swallowed hard, the pain still fresh. That's up to him, I suppose. I won't chase after someone who sees me as an inconvenience, even if that someone is my son. I deserve better than that. Catherine nodded, approvingly. Yes, you do. She pulled into the parking lot of the Maple Inn, a charming colonial building with white clapboard siding and green shutters. Before I could thank her for the ride, she reached into her handbag and extracted a business card. I run a charitable foundation, she explained, handing me the card. We're always looking for people with library experience to help with our literacy programs. The pay is decent, and the hours are flexible. If you're interested, call me next. Weak. I stared at the card, touched by the unexpected offer. Why would you help me? You're Jennifer's godmother. Catherine's lips curved into a wry smile. Perhaps because I admire anyone who stands up for their own dignity. Or perhaps because I've spent 68 years in Boston society and find it refreshingly honest when someone punctures its self-important bubble. She patted my hand. Either way, the offer stands. With a grateful nod, I tucked the card into my purse and stepped out of the car. Thank you, Catherine, for everything. You're welcome, Eleanor. And for what it's worth, what you did tonight took tremendous courage. After checking into my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, physically and emotionally drained. The events of the day played on loop in my mind. The ceremony, the reception, Jennifer's dismissive comments, Tyler's betrayal, my final stand. Had I done the right thing? Or had I simply burned a bridge that could never be rebuilt? My phone, which I'd silenced for the ceremony and forgotten to check since, showed multiple missed calls and text messages. Most were from Tyler, growing, increasingly urgent. 4:45 p.m. Mom, where are you? We need to talk. 12 p.m. Please call me back. This is ridiculous. 37 p.m. You can't just leave like this. We have guests asking questions. 1 p.m. Mom, please. You're making this so much worse. The last text, sent just 20 minutes ago, had a different tone. 45 p.m. I'm sorry. I should have been honest with Jennifer from the start. I never meant for things to get so out of hand. Please call me when you're ready to talk. I set the phone aside without responding. His apology, while a start, still focused on his dishonesty with Jennifer rather than his treatment of me. Some wounds would take more than a hasty text message to heal. There was also a voicemail from an unexpected source. Richard Preston. Eleanor, This is Richard. What happened tonight was unfortunate. While I don't approve of your methods, I understand your frustration. Jennifer has agreed to explain the financial situation to her friends. Tyler assures me he'll make arrangements to repay you over time. I hope we can put this unpleasantness behind us for the sake of the children's marriage. Good night. No apology, just damage control. I deleted the message without a second thought. Sleep came fitfully that night, my dreams a jumble of wedding scenes and financial anxieties. When I finally rose the next morning, I felt oddly calm, as if the emotional storm had passed, leaving me battered but clear-eyed. Over a simple breakfast in the inn's dining room, I made a list of practical next steps. I would need to call a real estate agent when I returned home, get an assessment of my house's value in the current market. I'd need to research part-time jobs, perhaps consider Catherine's offer. Most importantly, I needed to meet with a financial advisor to determine exactly how dire my situation was and what options remained. As I worked on my list, an older couple at a nearby table kept glancing my way, whispering to each other. Finally, the woman approached, looking slightly embarrassed. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly. "Aren't you the mother of the groom from the Bennett-Preston wedding?" I tensed, preparing for judgment or criticism. "Yes, I am." To my surprise, she smiled warmly. "I just wanted to say how brave you were last night. My husband and I have known the Prestons for years. Our daughters went to school with Jennifer. They've always been—" She searched for a diplomatic term. "Status conscious." What you said needed to be said. Her husband joined her, nodding in agreement. Richard's been telling everyone his daughter married into old money for months. Quite the shock to learn it was all coming from you. I didn't know how to respond to their unexpected support. Thank you for saying that. It wasn't an easy thing to do. Standing up for yourself rarely is, the woman said wisely. But it's always worth it in the end. After they returned to their table, I sat with their words, finding comfort in the validation from strangers. Perhaps I wasn't alone in my perception of the situation after all. Checking out of the inn later that morning, I was surprised to find my bill had already been settled. The desk clerk handed me an envelope along with my receipt. "This was left for you earlier," she explained. Inside was a brief note in unfamiliar handwriting. "Eleanor, your room has been transferred to my account. It's the least I could do after you paid for everything else. Consider it the beginning of a very long repayment plan. I'm truly sorry for everything. When you're ready to talk, I'll be here." Tyler, I folded the note carefully and placed it in my purse. It wasn't enough, not nearly enough, but it was a start. A small acknowledgement of the immense financial burden he'd placed on me, and perhaps a first step toward genuine understanding. As I waited for my taxi to the train station, I gazed around at the picturesque New England landscape, ablaze with autumn colors. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had come here to celebrate a joyous occasion and was leaving alone, my finances in ruins but my self-respect intact. Sometimes I reflected, the most expensive lessons are the most valuable. I had paid dearly to learn that my worth wasn't measured by what I could give others, but by how I allowed myself to be treated. And that, perhaps, was worth every penny. The for sale sign on my front lawn had been there for nearly a month before the realtor called with the news. An offer had come in. Not as high as we'd initially hoped, but reasonable given the market conditions and the house's need for updates. I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where Mark and I had shared countless meals, where I'd helped Tyler with his homework, and where I'd written all those checks for his wedding and signed the acceptance papers. It was time to let go. The autumn leaves had given way to early winter frost, and Thanksgiving had passed without a word from Tyler or Jennifer. They'd returned from their Bali honeymoon 2 weeks after the wedding, according to social media posts I couldn't help but notice. looking tanned and carefree against backdrops of tropical beaches and luxury resorts. The honeymoon I had paid, for with the last of my accessible funds. I hadn't reached out, and neither had they. At least not after those initial text messages and that single note left at the inn. The silence stretched between us like an ever-widening chasm, growing harder to bridge with each passing day. On a brisk December morning, I found myself in the tastefully appointed office of Catherine Morgan, Jennifer's godmother and my unexpected ally. True to her word, she had offered me a position with her foundation's literacy program, coordinating volunteer readers and organizing book donations for underserved communities. The work suited my skills and experience perfectly, and the part-time schedule allowed me to focus on downsizing my home in preparation for the move. "Eleanor, come in," Catherine greeted me warmly, rising from behind her desk. "How are the volunteers treating you?" I smiled, settling into the comfortable chair across from her. "They're wonderful, dedicated, passionate about literacy. It reminds me of my early days at the library." "Good, good." She studied me for a moment, her keen eyes missing nothing. "And the house? Any progress?" "An offer came in yesterday. It's not quite what I'd hoped for, but it's fair. With the proceeds, I should be able to clear my debts and put a down payment on a small condo near the community college. Maybe even have enough left to rebuild a modest emergency fund." Catherine nodded approvingly. "Practical as always. And have you heard from—" She didn't need to complete the sentence. We both knew who she meant. "No," I admitted, the familiar ache dulling but not disappearing. "Not since right after the wedding. And you haven't reached out either," she observed. It wasn't a question. I shook my head. I said what I needed to say that night. The next step has to come from him. A real step, not just a text message or paying for a hotel room. Understandable. Catherine leaned back in her chair, regarding me thoughtfully. Though I must say, the grapevine has been unusually active. Diane Preston called me last week, fishing for information about you. My eyebrows rose in surprise. About me? Why would she care? Apparently, Catherine said with a hint of amusement, Jennifer has been struggling with certain financial realities. The Prestons have always maintained appearances, but Richard's business has faced challenges recently. They expected Tyler's supposed family wealth to ease their daughter's transition to married life. A small, vindictive part of me felt satisfaction at this news, though I quickly suppressed it. That's unfortunate, but it's not my concern anymore. No, it isn't, Catherine agreed. But it might explain why Diane seemed so interested in whether you had calmed down and might be persuaded to help the young couple. I couldn't help but laugh at the audacity. After everything that happened, they still think of me as an ATM. Old habits die hard, Catherine remarked dryly. I told her you were doing quite well, focusing on your new career and future plans. I may have emphasized how many generous people in our community have reached out to support you after hearing about your situation. You didn't, I gasped, both mortified and amused. Catherine's eyes twinkled. 68 years in Boston society has taught me a thing or two about strategic information sharing. Diane nearly choked on her tea. Our conversation shifted to work matters, but Catherine's revelation lingered in my mind throughout the day. The Prestons were still attempting to manipulate the situation, still viewing me as a potential resource to be tapped. And Tyler? Was he complicit in these efforts? Or was he finally standing on his own 2 feet? That evening, as I sorted through decades of accumulated possessions, deciding what to keep, what to sell, what to donate, my doorbell rang. Expecting the realtor with paperwork for the house sale, I was stunned to find Tyler standing on my porch, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, looking younger and more vulnerable than I'd seen him in years. "Mom," he said simply, his breath visible in the cold air. I stood frozen for a moment, unprepared for this moment despite having imagined it countless times. "Tyler, can I come in? It's freezing out here." I stepped aside wordlessly, allowing him to enter the home he'd grown up in. He looked around, taking in the packing boxes and labeled bins that now occupied most of the living room. "You're really selling the house," he said quietly, as if only now believing it was true. "Yes." I closed the door against the winter chill. The offer was accepted yesterday. He nodded, still standing awkwardly in the entryway, not making a move. To remove his coat or take a seat. "I drove by and saw the sign, but I thought maybe you were just, I don't know, making a point." "This isn't about making points, Tyler. It's about financial necessity." I gestured toward the kitchen. "Would you like some coffee? Tea?" "Coffee would be great, thanks." The familiar routine of preparing coffee gave me a moment to collect my thoughts, to steel myself against whatever this visit might bring. Tyler followed me into the kitchen, taking his usual seat at the table as if the past few months had never happened. "So," I said, placing a mug before him and sitting across the table, "what brings you here after all this time?" He wrapped his hands around the mug, staring into its depths as if searching for answers there. "I've been trying to call you for weeks." "I got a new number," I admitted. "After the wedding, I needed some space." "Right." He nodded, understanding if not accepting. "That makes sense." Silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Tyler looked up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. "I came to apologize," he said, his voice low but clear. "Not just for the wedding, but for everything. For taking advantage of your generosity. For letting you empty your savings for my sake. For not standing up to Jennifer when she treated you poorly." He swallowed hard. "For being a terrible son." The raw pain in his voice reached past my defenses, touching the part of me that would always be his mother, always loving him regardless of his mistakes. But I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "These past few months have been eye-opening," he went on. "Jennifer and we've been struggling. Not just financially, though that's certainly part of it. Her parents expected me to provide a certain lifestyle for her, one I obviously can't afford. When reality hit, things got tense." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father's that my heart ached. "We've been in counseling since October." This surprised me. "Counseling? That's good, I suppose." It was Jennifer's idea. Actually, after everything blew up at the wedding, after her parents realized there was no family money coming their way, she had to face some hard truths about why she married me. He gave a humorless laugh. "Turns out, when you strip away the illusions, you have to decide if what's left is enough." "And is it?" I asked carefully. Tyler shrugged. "Some days yes, some days no. We're working on it. But that's not why I'm here." He took a deep breath. "I came because I need to make things right with you. Or at least try to." From his coat pocket, he withdrew an envelope and placed it on the table between us. "This is the first payment. It's not much, just $2,000, but it's a start. I've set up a direct deposit to transfer the same amount to your account, on the first of every month until I've repaid everything you spent on the wedding." I stared at the envelope, emotion threatening to overwhelm me. "Tyler, that would take years. 3 years and 5 months to be exact," he confirmed. "I've worked it all out. I got a second job drafting house plans on weekends. Jennifer's taken on social media consulting work. We've moved to a smaller apartment to cut expenses." His expression was determined, resolute in a way I hadn't seen since he was a boy. "We're going to make this right, Mom. I'm going to make this right." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, but experience had taught me to be cautious. "Does Jennifer know about this plan?" "It was her idea," he said, surprising me again. After the counseling sessions, After she really understood what you sacrificed for us, she was the one who suggested we live on my salary and use her entire income for repayment. I was speechless, unable to reconcile this information with the entitled, dismissive woman who had called me the help at her wedding. I know it's hard to believe, Tyler acknowledged, reading my expression. But the wedding, what you said, what you did, it forced her to look at herself in a way she never had before. She's not a different person overnight, but she's trying. We both are. He reached across the table, hesitantly placing his hand over mine. I don't expect forgiveness right away. I know I hurt you deeply, betrayed your trust. But I hope, with time and consistent action, you might be willing to let me be your son again. The lump in my throat made it difficult to speak. Tyler, you never stopped being my son. That's why it hurt so much. I know, he whispered, his own eyes growing damp. And I'm so sorry. We sat there in the kitchen of the home I would soon leave behind, the silence between us no longer strained but contemplative. There were no easy answers, no instant fixes. Trust, once broken, took time to rebuild, if it could be rebuilt at all. But as I looked at my son, truly looked at him, I saw something that gave me hope. Accountability. Not excuses, not charm, not the easy deflection that had become his pattern, but genuine accountability for his actions and their consequences. It wasn't everything, but it was a beginning. Spring had arrived in Massachusetts, bringing with it renewal, both literal and symbolic. My new condo, a modest 2-bedroom unit in a well-maintained building near the community college, was finally starting to feel like home. The space was smaller than my old house, but brighter somehow, with large windows that flooded the rooms with morning light. I'd kept only what truly mattered from my old life: Mark's reading chair, family photos, a few cherished books, and the handmade quilt my mother had given us as a wedding present decades ago. The literacy program at Catherine's Foundation had expanded under my coordination, now reaching 12 underserved schools across the county. The work energized me, giving purpose to my days and connecting me with a community of like-minded volunteers. My financial situation, while not abundant, had stabilized. The house sale had cleared my debts, and Tyler's monthly payments, which had arrived like clockwork on the first of each month, were slowly rebuilding my savings. Our relationship remained tentative, healing in small increments. We spoke on the phone every Sunday, a ritual we had established in February, sharing updates about our lives with careful politeness that gradually softened into something more genuine. He never asked for money, never hinted at financial struggles. Although I knew from Catherine's occasional updates that the young couple was still adjusting to living within their means, Jennifer remained a more complicated subject. I hadn't seen her since the wedding, though Tyler occasionally mentioned therapy insights she had shared or projects she was working on. According to him, she had taken on social media management for several small businesses, work she could do from home in the evenings after her main job. The extra income was dedicated entirely to repaying me, a fact that still surprised me whenever I thought about it. On a particularly beautiful Saturday in May, I was planting herbs in small containers on my condo's modest balcony when my phone chimed with a text from Tyler. "Mom, would it be okay if we stopped by today around 4? There's something we'd like to discuss with you. Nothing bad, I promise." The "we" caused a small flutter of anxiety in my chest. This would be the first time I'd faced Jennifer since that fateful night at the wedding reception. Despite the months of reflection and Tyler's assurances of change, I wasn't sure I was ready. But I had learned something important during these months of rebuilding. Growth required discomfort. Healing demanded facing difficult emotions rather than avoiding them. "Of course," I texted back. "I'll make coffee." The hours until their arrival passed slowly as I tidied my already clean condo and prepared a simple spread of coffee, tea, and the lemon squares I'd baked the day before. At precisely 4 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Tyler stood there, looking healthier than he had during his December visit, the shadows under his eyes gone. Beside him, Jennifer appeared markedly different from the polished, imperious bride I remembered. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face bearing minimal makeup. She wore jeans and a casual blouse rather than the designer clothing she had favored before. Most striking, however, was her expression. Nervous, uncertain, and lacking the entitled confidence that had once defined her. "Hi, Mom," Tyler said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "Thanks for seeing us." "Eleanor," Jennifer added softly, not meeting my eyes. "Thank you for having us." I gestured them inside, noting the way they moved together. Still connected, but with a different quality to their interaction. Less performance, more partnership. "Your place is lovely," Jennifer commented as they settled onto the sofa. "So, much natural light." "Thank you," I replied, serving coffee in mismatched mugs I'd collected from local craft fairs. "It suits me well." An awkward silence descended, heavy with unspoken history. Tyler cleared his throat. "Mom, we wanted to talk to you about something important." He glanced at Jennifer, who nodded encouragingly. "As you know, we've been working hard these past months, both on our finances and our relationship. The counseling has helped us understand some patterns that weren't healthy, expectations that weren't realistic." Jennifer spoke up, her voice softer than I remembered. "What happened at the wedding? What I said about you, how I treated you, it forced me to confront some ugly truths about myself." She twisted her hands in her lap, a gesture of genuine discomfort. "I was raised to value status, to pursue a certain lifestyle at any cost. My parents taught me that appearances matter more than authenticity, that what others think of you determines your worth." She finally looked up, meeting my gaze directly. "It's not an excuse. Nothing excuses how I treated you, but understanding where those behaviors came from has helped me begin to change them." I nodded, acknowledging her words without immediately offering the absolution she might be seeking. "Change takes time." "It does," she agreed. "And I'm still learning, still making mistakes, but I'm committed to being different, to being better." She glanced at Tyler, who squeezed her hand supportively. "Which brings us to why we're here." Tyler took over. "Mom, we've been discussing our future, making plans. The apartment we're in now is fine for the short term, but eventually we'd like something more permanent. We've been saving, setting aside whatever we can while still maintaining our repayment schedule to you." "Which we remain completely committed to," Jennifer interjected quickly. "That's non-negotiable." Tyler nodded. "Absolutely. But we've also been exploring options for purchasing a home in a few years, something modest but with room to grow." He hesitated, then continued. "Because we're thinking about starting a family." The words hung in the air, laden with implication. My potential grandchild, a new generation, a reason to fully bridge the painful divide that had opened between us. "That's significant news," I said carefully, processing my complex emotions. Joy at the prospect of a grandchild mingled with lingering hurt and warranted caution. "Not immediately," Jennifer clarified. "We're not financially ready yet, and there's still work to do on our own first. But maybe in a year or two, if we stay on track." "The thing is, Mom," Tyler continued, "we've been talking about what kind of parents we want to be, what values we want to instill." His voice grew more earnest. "And we both agree that we want our child to know their grandmother, to have you in their life in a meaningful way." Jennifer nodded, her expression more vulnerable than I'd ever seen it. "My relationship with my parents has changed since the wedding. They're still struggling to accept our actual financial situation, still pushing us to maintain appearances we can't afford." She sighed. "I don't want our child raised with those values, that pressure to seem rather than to be." I studied them both, searching for sincerity and finding it in their open expressions and steady gazes. This wasn't manipulation or an elaborate scheme to regain access to financial support. This was something more fundamental, a genuine desire to heal what had been broken, to build something healthier for the next generation. "I appreciate you sharing this with me," I said finally. "The prospect of a grandchild is wonderful, but I want to be clear. My relationship with that child would need to be based on mutual respect between all of us. I won't be just a convenient babysitter or an ATM for college funds." "We know that," Tyler assured me quickly. "That's actually part of what we wanted to discuss." Jennifer straightened, seeming to gather her courage. "Eleanor, I owe you an apology. Not just for what happened at the wedding, but for how I treated you throughout our relationship. I was dismissive, entitled, and frankly, cruel." Her voice wavered but remained steady. "I called you the help because I saw you as a resource to be used rather than a person to be respected. I didn't value your experience, your input, or your feelings." She brushed away an unexpected tear. "I can't undo that damage, but I can acknowledge it honestly. I can commit to being different moving forward, not just for a potential grandchild's sake, but because it's the right thing to do, because you deserve better." Her words, spoken without artifice or calculation, touched something deep within me. Not enough to instantly heal all wounds, but enough to crack open the door to possibility. "Thank you for saying that," I said quietly. "It means a great deal to hear you acknowledge what happened." Tyler reached for my hand across the coffee table. "Mom, we're not asking for immediate trust. We know that has to be earned back, day by day, action by action. We're just asking for a chance to show you, over time, that things really have changed. That we've changed." I squeezed his hand gently, then released it. "I think that's reasonable. Time will tell the story better than words can." We sipped our coffee, the atmosphere lightening perceptibly as the conversation shifted to more neutral topics: my work with the literacy program, Tyler's recent projects at the architecture firm, Jennifer's growing social media business. When they rose to leave an hour later, the interaction had been civil, occasionally warm, and undeniably honest. At tea. "The door?" Jennifer hesitated, then spoke with quiet sincerity. "Your home really is lovely, Eleanor. Not because of what it costs or how it looks to others, but because it reflects who you are. I'm learning to see value differently now." After they left, I stood on my small balcony, watching as they walked hand in hand to their car. The young couple that had once seemed focused solely on appearances now moved with a grounded authenticity that suggested real growth. Could people truly change so fundamentally? My years had taught me both caution and hope. The wisdom to recognize that transformation was possible, coupled with the experience to know it was rarely instant or complete. As I turned back to my herb garden, carefully tucking soil around delicate seedlings, I reflected on the nature of growth itself. It required the right conditions, consistent nurturing, and above all, time. Some plants flourished quickly, others needed seasons to reveal their strength. Relationships, I was learning, followed similar patterns. The one with my son and daughter-in-law had been damaged at its roots, but perhaps not destroyed. With careful tending and realistic expectations, it might yet grow into something new, not identical to what I had once imagined, but potentially vibrant in its own way. Only time would tell. And for the first time in many months, I found myself looking forward to the unfolding story. "Careful with that box, it's got the crystal," I cautioned, as Tyler carried another carefully labeled container from his truck into the modest colonial house he and Jennifer had just purchased. It was their housewarming, exactly 1 year after our conversation about their plans for the future, and I had arrived early to help with the unpacking. The home was nothing like the luxury Jennifer had once envisioned, A simple 3-bedroom in a middle-class neighborhood with good schools and tree-lined streets. The mortgage was within their means. The down payment saved through 2 years of careful budgeting rather than parental assistance. They had done it themselves, step by method. "Where do you want this, Mom?" Tyler asked, slightly winded from the multiple trips up and down the stairs. "Kitchen? Middle island," Jennifer answered before I could, emerging from the hallway with a stack of flattened boxes. She was 6 months pregnant, her belly creating a gentle curve beneath her simple cotton dress. "Eleanor, I've unpacked most of the kitchen essentials, but could you help me figure out where to put all these serving pieces? You're much better at organization than I am." The easy way she included me, sought my input without the performative deference she might have shown in the past, spoke volumes about our evolving relationship. Not close friends, certainly, but no longer adversaries. Something more like family finding its own unique rhythm. Over the past year, our interactions had increased gradually in both frequency and warmth. Sunday phone calls became occasional, dinners, then holiday gatherings, each meeting building upon the last. The repayment plan continued without faltering, but it was no longer the central focus of our relationship, just one aspect of the accountability Tyler and Jennifer had committed to maintaining. Most surprising was Jennifer's personal transformation. The entitled bride who had once dismissed me as the help now lived with genuine humility, working 2 jobs without complaint, furnishing their home with second-hand finds. She refinished herself, and speaking of my financial literacy workshops, with sincere respect. The pregnancy had softened her further, bringing out a vulnerability I'd never imagined she possessed. "Have you thought more about the nursery colors?" I asked, carefully unpacking a set of serving platters and arranging them in a cabinet. Jennifer nodded, rubbing her back absently. "We're thinking sage green with natural wood accents, gender-neutral, calm. Tyler's designing a mural for the wall behind the crib, a forest scene with little animals." "That sounds lovely," I said, picturing it. "Very peaceful. Like that children's book you gave us," she added. "The one you used to read to Tyler. We've been reading it to the baby already, even though I know she can't understand the words yet." The casual reference to a memory I'd shared months ago, a simple story about bedtime rituals when Tyler was small, caught me by surprise. She had been listening, truly listening, not just performing interest. Tyler reappeared, wiping sweat from his brow. "Last box from the truck. The furniture delivery should be here in about an hour." He glanced between us, smiling at the domestic scene. "How's it going in here?" "Your wife is putting me to work," I teased, the words coming naturally, now where they once would have felt impossible. Jennifer laughed, then winced slightly, pressing a hand to her side. "You okay?" Tyler was immediately attentive, moving to her side. "Just a kick. Your daughter is practicing her soccer skills today." She took his hand and placed it on her belly. "Feel that?" The love that passed between them in that moment was palpable, genuine, hard-won, and grounded in reality rather than fantasy. They had built something real together, something that could withstand the challenges life would inevitably bring. Later, as we took a break for lunch on the back porch, Tyler broached the subject I'd been expecting. "Mom, we've been thinking about the baby's name," he began, exchanging a glance with Jennifer. "We'd like to honor Dad somehow, but obviously Mark doesn't work for a girl. We were considering Marie," Jennifer added. "After your husband, but feminine, Eleanor Marie Bennett, if that's okay with you." The unexpected gesture, not just the middle name honoring Mark, but the first name honoring me, left me momentarily speechless. "You want to name her Eleanor?" I finally managed. Jennifer nodded, her expression uncharacteristically shy. "It's a beautiful name, strong, classic, and—" She hesitated. "It would be a reminder of the values we want to instill in her. Integrity, dignity, standing up for yourself even when it's difficult." Tyler reached for my hand across the table. "What do you think, Mom? Is it okay?" The question encompassed so much more than just the name. It was an acknowledgement of our journey. The pain, the growth, the slow rebuilding of trust. It was a final closure to the chapter that had begun with a bride calling me the help, and ended with that same woman, humbled and transformed, paying tribute to the very person she had once dismissed. "I'd be honored," I said simply, emotion making further words impossible. We sat together on that porch, three imperfect people bound by complicated love, looking out at the modest backyard where a child, my grandchild, would someday play. The future stretched before us, uncertain but hopeful, a path we would navigate together with newfound wisdom. That evening, after the furniture had been delivered and basic necessities unpacked, I prepared to return to my condo. Jennifer walked me to my car, the setting sun casting long shadows across the driveway. "Thank you for today," she said, lingering by the driver's door. "And for—" She gestured vaguely, seemingly at a loss for words. "For what?" I prompted gently. "For giving me another chance?" she finished quietly. "For showing me what real strength looks like." I was so lost in what I thought mattered. Appearances, status, other people's approval. I never understood what was actually important until that night at the wedding when you stood up for yourself. She placed a hand on her rounded belly. "I want to raise our daughter differently. I want her to know her worth isn't in what she owns, or how she looks, or who her family knows. I want her to be like you." The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable, the growth evident in every word. This wasn't Jennifer who had orchestrated an extravagant wedding to impress others, but a woman who had confronted her flaws and committed to change. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but persistently. "You're going to be a wonderful mother," I told her, and meant it. As I drove home through the quiet evening streets, I reflected on the strange, painful, ultimately redemptive journey of the past 2 years. From being called the servant at my son's wedding to becoming the namesake of my first grandchild, a transformation none of us could have predicted or engineered. The mother in me, the part that would always love Tyler unconditionally, was healing. The woman in me, who had learned to demand respect and set boundaries, was flourishing. Both aspects of myself now existed in harmony. Neither sacrificed for the other. Sometimes standing up for yourself isn't the end of relationships, but their true beginning. Sometimes revealing painful truths doesn't destroy connections, but strengthens them, burning away falsehood to reveal something genuine underneath. And sometimes, the most unexpected people can change in the most remarkable ways, if only given the chance and the consequences that make growth possible. Little Eleanor Marie Bennett would be born into a family that had learned these lessons the hard way, through hurt and healing, through accountability and forgiveness, through the slow, steady work of becoming better than we once were. That, I decided as I turned toward home, was a gift worth more than any wedding could buy. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories, ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.